Another one of the toxic chemicals that is so pervasive, not only in the Great Lakes, but in the oceans and, in fact, most of the waters in the United States, are the dioxins. The problem with dioxins is that they are a volatile chemical. Dioxins enter the atmosphere primarily from burning plastics, and they're carried in the atmosphere and brought back down to Earth in precipitation, that is, primarily in rainfall. These dioxins are entering the Great Lakes in rain during the colder months, during the colder periods, and then revolatilize, that is, evaporate back into the atmosphere during the warmer weather. So basically what you're accomplishing with dioxins, unfortunately, is that you're creating a cycle between air and water that can go on and on and on. If you're not familiar with dioxins, remember Agent Orange in Vietnam and how toxic chemical dioxins are. To give you another indication of the toxicity of dioxins, in North Carolina, Pigeon River has had dioxins dumped into it in huge quantities over the years. In this case, coming primarily from pulp and paper mills. These dioxins have become so pervasive within the food chain in the Pigeon River that few organisms survive to present day. In fact, there's only a few sludge worms, some carp, some suckers, and these organisms that have survived, are stunted and deformed. Two other major toxins are Mirex and ketones. Mirex have a special meaning for Lake Ontario because they're one of the worst of the toxic chemicals within Ontario. Both of these are chlorinated hydrocarbons. Both of these have been used to control insect pests, primarily ants and roaches. Mirex, we'll speak about that one first, since it is probably Ontario's major problem. Mirex is very, very highly bioconcentrated in food chains. Lake trout taken in the late 70s from Lake Ontario had Mirex concentrations up to 14 million times the concentration in water. Maybe some of the highest bioconcentrations that have ever been found in aquatic species. Ketones, as I mentioned, also a chlorinated hydrocarbon, more persistent than DDT, is found in a lot of areas in the United States, again in aquatic habitats. The James River that empties into Chesapeake Bay had a lot of ketones dumped into it, again bioconcentrated in the food chain. In the Chesapeake Bay, the shellfish population was practically destroyed. Those that didn't die became sterile, so there was no reproduction. And of course, the famous Chesapeake blue crab became inedible. Bluefish that were feeding on invertebrates in the Chesapeake Bay bioconcentrated high amounts of ketones, and for hundreds of miles up and down the coast, the East Coast, the bluefish were inedible. PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls, another major horror story throughout our country in terms of toxic chemicals. PCB is a proven carcinogen, as you know, a cancer-causing chemical. Lake Michigan, which also has major problems with toxic waste, probably their number one problem is PCBs. Again, entering the lake through paper mills primarily, PCBs concentrations in Michigan salmonids are extremely high, and it's also recommended that they not be consumed. As I mentioned, this is not confined to the Great Lakes. Lobsters off the coast of New England have very high levels of PCBs as well. And in fact, the levels are about 20 times in terms of concentration of the recommended consumable level by the federal government. As we mentioned with the trout, with the lobsters, you can reduce the potential contamination in consuming them by removing the hepatopancreas, or the digestive gland, where most of the PCBs are concentrated. Probably the greatest horror story, however, involved with PCBs. God, this is a beautiful view looking out across Lake Ontario. I hope film does justice, video does justice to what a spectacular location we're filming at today.